systems and community processes to really help to bring more awareness to community topics and more participatory decision making, and then go more into how that has led to this Water Mela and the kind of outcomes that the citizens have really achieved. So to warm us up, I'm going to invite you to reflect on a couple of questions, and the response is either yes, no, or maybe. Yeah? So I was going to get you all to stand up and stand in the post. I think that's a bit complicated. Or we could do it like this, as Nikki's suggesting. This is a yes, this is a maybe, and this is a no to the question. Yeah. So here we go. And put your hands up really high so we can see, and take a look around too, so you can also see each other's. Yeah. So the first question is: do you feel well informed about what is a citizens' assembly? Yes, no, maybe. Okay, so we've got some mixed, some yes, and a couple of no's. Okay, good. Question: I think active engagement in decision making on topics that concern the future of the community is a civic responsibility. Lots of thumbs up. Excellent. We're in the right crowd. Next question. I am satisfied with the ways that I can express my voice in Auroville on issues that I feel concerned about. Not so many thumbs up. A few. And do take a look around, because this is a pulse. In fact, this is one of the things we did during the initial phases of the citizens' assemblies. We took pulses like this to try to get an understanding. I think the systems we have in place today genuinely empower the community to engage in decision making. Okay, I don't think I see a single thumb. Sorry, my voice is a little bit croaky today, so bear with me. I trust that appointed leaders are the best people to make decisions on behalf of the community. Interesting. A lot of no's. I would trust a well-informed, randomly selected group of people to make decisions more than appointed leaders. I would trust a well-informed, randomly selected group of people, or citizens, community members, to make decisions more than I would trust appointed leaders. Interesting. Yep. So a lot of diversity in the response to that. Last question. I would enjoy engaging in dialogue with people in Auroville who have very different perspectives from me. Very interesting. So mostly we'd like to be engaging with people that we're maybe not typically engaging with. Okay, great. So this was a warm-up. Obviously there's no right or wrong answer here, yeah? And maybe you check in as the presentation unfolds whether your perspective changes on these questions as we get to the end. Okay, let's run with the presentation. So we're going to start with talking a little bit about what was the journey we went on to launch the Citizens' Assembly, what it is, why for Auroville we think it's an interesting idea, and then we'll go into the details of what actually happened, and then the outcomes. What have we learned? What were the outcomes? This is obviously one of the outcomes, but it's not the only outcome of Citizens' Assembly. Next. So what is it? In essence, a citizens' assembly is a randomly selected group of people who are called to hear from informed people on a specific topic, after which they're supported to engage in small group facilitated discussions to be enabled to make educated recommendations and suggestions. That's the principle. Next. The core elements of the Citizens' Assembly. So these are core wherever the Citizens' Assembly is happening. This is a process that is being applied really all over the world. So first of all, there's an issue that's identified and a committee formed to run the assembly. Then there's a random selection of participants. Assemblies convened, consultation process to hear different perspectives happens. facilitated deliberation in small groups, small tables happens, and then collective decision making leading to recommendations. So these are the steps that it goes through. Why? So basically, the reason that citizens' assemblies are gaining a lot of traction around the world is because they're seen as, first of all, fair and inclusive. Because of this random selection of participants, it means that anybody in your population potentially can have a seat at the table. So there is this not, you can't sort of manipulate, you can't buy a seat at the table. It's really anybody. It's transparent, so it reduces the influence of vested interests. Create informed communities, so as people go through the process as participants, they become educated, informed on topics that are of importance to the community as a whole. So it really up levels the whole education of your community. They're effective and high quality judgments typically come out, and it's really been seen that diverse groups make better decisions, especially when they're given time for deliberation. And they're also legitimate and trusted. So recommendations from people like me, because imagine in a group of randomly selected people, there's typically someone in the room who represents something of what my interests are. So they provide a trusted way forward, supporting all the decisions. Got a lot of people coming in. So exciting. We're just going to
No, not really.
Okay, we continue. I'm going to keep going because there's some really nice, juicy stuff to get to. This is really important, I think. So, where has it been tried? It's been tried literally, I'd say, in hundreds of countries around the world. This is not a new thing. You know, Auroville's just, it's the first in Auroville, but there's been, I think, hundreds actually. They're gaining momentum all the time. So there's just a few examples. The most famous one you may have heard about, I think, was in Ireland on same-sex marriage and abortion a number of years ago. But they're typically taking up topics in many countries in India and Europe. It's not just a Western thing. And also why we think it's an alternative that's being sought in Auroville. I think this is probably something that most of us have seen or we just have some experience with, that there's a widespread concern that many important issues are getting stuck. We're not making much progress on important issues, and sometimes for many, many years. Aurovillians feel disengaged with existing processes and fearful to participate. I mean, some people are confident to participate, but many are not. They're not harvesting the wisdom of the community. We're increasingly stuck in silo mentality and groupings, and there is potential for civic engagement in the community, which is not being tapped. This is what we see. And of course, why Auroville? I hope this is self-evident, but there's a sense that, it's a place that really feels connected to the sort of to our vision and our values of human community, unending education, research, experimentation, building trust in decision-making processes. And, as we get to engage with people who maybe have very different ideas, that we can learn together, and opportunity to serve Auroville with building civic responsibility. Like, we are building this Auroville together. So this is a great set of tools that can help us do that. So we decided to make an experiment, and a pilot was born. But bear in mind, just talking general now. So now we're going into the specifics. What did the journey involve? So first of all, it was a group of people who just felt that this idea had merit, and we wanted to see whether there was interest and enthusiasm to try something like this in Auroville, and we found there was. We did a lot of different things like sounding boards, a little bit like what a little practice we did, or that little process we did before, just to get pulses. So we could see that people were willing to try something like this. A core group formed, and they were formed to work on there's a few key elements: the process design, topic selection, participant selection, and the planning processes to really make this thing take off. Then we formed a set of subgroups. So there was an advisory group, we'll go into more detail in a moment, facilitation team, which held the process, a research group, who also evaluated. It was as a pilot, it was very much a research project, so we studied every aspect about the pilot. Communications and filming crew, and volunteers were all that were volunteers. So a lot of people, a lot of hours went into making this happen. And then just briefly, the timeline of steps. Actually, we started this kind of conversations in September 2 years ago now, actually. And then preparing for the topic and participant selection in January 2020, we agreed the topic was water, and participants were randomly selected and invited. Everybody who had been selected got a personal invitation because nobody at that stage much knew what it was. So we really had to go and explain what they'd be getting into, what kind of commitment. Then from February to March, and we all know what happened in March 2020, we were just starting to get it up and running, and then lockdown happened. And there was a lot of preparation, but we had to pause. And then we reconvened in June to October 2020, and we had to literally redesign it to function under COVID conditions and start again. And we had the participants who were originally selected, most of them stayed on, and we had to do another round of selections because we lost some participants in the meantime. So, and then finally, everything was also filmed and edited, and
November to January
was the actual pilot. Yeah, was the actual sessions in the week. Next. Okay. Oh, yeah, selecting a topic. So this is in general. What's a good topic can be controversial and challenging. Question must be clear and precise, with a scope broad enough to allow room for true debate, but narrow enough that can be discussed in the time available. So there are constraints, yeah. Address an issue of collective concern and valid evidence to express the topic in its multidimensionality. Are there enough different perspectives and stakeholders and people who can really flesh out the scope of the topic to have a kind of, juicy citizens assembly? And then, we can go on. Then the topic was where we shortlisted a few topics. And so the three that we shortlisted were water, portus as a service or commercial unit, or the selection process. And we went with water in the end because of its urgency and the readiness of the water players to engage with this citizens assembly with this topic. So that's how we settled on water for the pilot. And the task of the Citizens Assembly became developing a water vision for Auroville and recommendations for implementation. So it was because obviously water is a common resource, affects us all, and a successful process could help highlight the need for more concerted outreach with the bioregion and such issues. Builds on the extensive work. I think there was something like 40 plus water players identified in Auroville. So a lot of people were working on water, but it wasn't coordinated. So this gave a chance to really bring some of those elements together. Potential to focus initially on smaller actions that are within Auroville's capacity to implement, and a perfect issue to start with to engage diverse community members. Yep. Next. So then we started selecting participants. Just to say, we took from the master list a randomly selected, and we didn't end up doing any stratification like for age or gender or whatever. We just took the master list as a whole, and it was like every 20th name or something like that. We started with anyone over the age of 16 and newcomers. So this was a little bit widening the sort of scope of Aurovillian, because only that's 18-year-olds and it doesn't include newcomers. But we felt that, and with feedback, it seemed like it was worthwhile to try to include these elements as well, and these voices. We aimed to reach between 20 and 40 participants. We ended up with 30 agreeing. And I don't know if you can see it, but in terms of just this is languages rather than nationality, but we had a lot of languages there as well to consider. which also had implications for our preparation. We got everything, for example, translated into Tamil to make sure that people could participate, that would be left out because of language, and really looked at the needs of the translation. As I mentioned, it was an advisory team, and they had specific tasks to really reach out to all the water players, like map who they were, get them on board, assure that all the voices were at the table and all perspectives were balanced. Then we also looked at doing some presentations and site visits, but because of COVID, that became films. And then there was the organising of the filming interviews with the water players. It was a big part of the content, and peer review of the video footage to make sure that there was kind of this coherence in the messages that were coming across, but without filtering what was being said, and a compilation, translation, and dubbing of the video footage. A lot of work, and this was really important thanks to Laura Zeiss and Rebecca Tetch's team who put in this and many volunteers. Is that it? And eventually did, so I hand over to you.
So, like Kathy said, we started initially before COVID, and then we started again freshly with many of the old group, but some new people who joined in, new participants who were again randomly selected to make sure we were prepared people who were participants. So in terms of the process itself, the assembly met from October 2020 to January 2021. We met on Saturday mornings, and it was around 8 to 9 sessions that were sort of compulsory for participants to be there, and 2 sessions that were optional for those who could be. In terms of how we started, the most important part of the citizens' assembly is actually capacity building. So what we focused on as an initial introductory session was to build some skills in Auroville that we felt that were either in its latent stage or could improve. So part of that was setting the context for what the water topic, but also building skills such as bias awareness, being able to listen in groups, setting ground rules, and sort of really setting the tone for an assembly that would really spend time together and come to a conclusion. Now, as part of today, we will be doing a couple of the exercises that we did, the participants went through, so you'll get a little bit of a taste of what it means in terms of our work in building skills. In terms of the content session, so a big part of it is actually learning about the topic, getting presented with multiple perspectives, and being able to sort of hold many of these and to come up with the actual outcomes. So in the water topic, like Kathy said, I mean, there's 40 plus water players who've been working for many years at Auroville. So there was a big breadth of perspectives that we had to really make sure the participants could grapple with. So you can see some of what had happened. There's the context. We spoke with, you can read the names. We looked at the agriculture sector. We looked at integrated water management, which included infrastructure, which included the Mati Mandir, for example. It included a little bit around the forest work, desalination. We looked at water quality, spiritual qualities of water. We looked at planning and governance and education awareness. All of these multiple sort of ways in which somebody could plug into water. And these videos are all available on YouTube, and you can go and watch them also. So really, it's available for everybody to inform themselves. The content sessions involve participants watching the films and then splitting into smaller groups to have discussions around what it means to come up with a water vision, and also what needs to come out for implementation suggestions. We look outside of the content sessions. We also wanted to make sure that the water players themselves are also engaging with the process. So we had 2 sessions where the participants could come and ask questions to the water players around questions that were coming up with the content, because initially it was going to be presentations and questions, but now it's films. So now we made sure we had a space where they could come and engage with them as well, the experts. But also to make sure the experts themselves were getting an idea of what was coming out. So the people who are actually going to be holding this after the citizens' assembly were also engaged to make sure that things were not missing out of the participants. So they gave feedback on what the participants were also bringing out in terms of vision and implementation. So we incorporated that as well. So The final 2 sessions were held in January, and that was really okay. So far, we were harvesting various suggestions for the vision, the implementation, but now we needed to put it all together, and there was a lot that had come up. So we spent 2 Saturday mornings facilitating it in different ways, and you can see like the length of that whole room in Bhumika Hall was the priority with the implementation suggestions. So we had to come up with an exercise where it could be prioritized and synthesized into something, so we have an outcome of what could be a water vision for Auroville and what could be some of the implementation suggestions that the participants felt were priority or they wanted to see most happen. So that was what happened. In terms of our approach for how we facilitated these sessions, can you go back, Lakshmi? Next. You can see, okay, so the participants all came together, and that was some of the work, like we sort of tried to have these bindy system for organizing it. And the next one. Yeah. So in terms of a process like a citizens assembly, actually facilitation is quite crucial. To be able to hold the space so the participants can all feel like they are able to engage and have their voices heard. So some of the emphasis we had, like we said, was on building skills such as group trust building, listening, bias awareness. And in general, when citizens assemblies have been run around the world, they're actually quite mental, it's mind-based. So we wanted to try and make it a bit more Aurovillian in the sense of including other aspects. So we did exercises that included the body, some meditations, things like that, to engage with different parts of ourselves to come out with an outcome. We tried to have fun, not to just sit and sort of really just listen. And part of it was also creating an atmosphere where people could wanted to come and enjoy the sessions. The sessions built on each other, and there was a lot of emphasis on making sure that the quieter voices could also engage and have their voices in the final outcome. And an advantage of the citizen assembly process, if it's held well, is that it can also be emergent and adaptive. So part of that was also asking feedback from the participants after every session and making sure at least whatever could be included, other voices that they wanted to hear from other people, really make sure that the process could also adapt to the needs of the assembly itself. And we made sure there were translators. We tried to see, okay, what could be the things that could limit people from participating. So we asked if people needed translation support, so we provided that in Tamil, for example, because it was requested. We provided childcare support, so to try and make sure that the process could include as many people as possible. So with that, we're going to do a little bit of an exercise with you now to give you a taste of some of what the participants went through. So we have a role play, and this needs 6 volunteers who will come together to sit in a circle and to act out something. Okay, so you're going to take on. It's nothing too hard. So if anybody would like to come and do a bit of a role play, we need 6 volunteers. I can give you the context. The context is it's a community called Nirvana in Auroville that wants to. Some people in the community want to start a vegetable garden, but after an email went out, there's differing opinions on whether a vegetable garden should be present in the community or not. So this role play exercise is going to get these different voices together in a meeting. And maybe you might see something familiar in Aurovillian meetings, maybe you might not. But it might be an exercise for us to just observe and see what can come out. So is there a show of hands for maybe 6 volunteers?
You don't have to be good actors because you'll be given a role.
Yeah. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You need 1 more? 6. Okay, perfect. So Kathy, I will take you out of the room and prep you on what you need to do. And Kathy will be here and also set the stage.
Yeah.
Ladies at
Yeah. Okay. Am I here? No, is it possible to put something over the latest 3 or 50 minutes or turn it off? I don't know. Okay, I'll brief us all on what is the scenario. Yeah. and what we can do as observers, because observers have a role to play here as well. Okay? So, as Nikki said, the scenario is it's a community garden meeting. And Nirvana's the community in Auroville. It's got approximately 50 residents. Two of the residents, Anna and Arun, recently sent an email to the community requesting use of an unused space in the community to develop a community garden. The idea would be to grow local food, which can be shared by all community members. Anna is a new Aurovillian in her 20s who's passionate about sustainable living, and Arun is a scientist who sees the garden as a good opportunity for a research project. Their proposal received 2 objections from Matthew and Uma on the grounds that it's a waste of time and precious water. Recent surveys of the community's borewell show that the level has dropped significantly over the past 5 years, and there are fears it may dry up soon. Matthew has experiences of living in water-scarce conditions in Australia, and Uma is a founder of Nirvana Community and has seen too many community gardening projects fail. The other 2 participants are Lydia, a shy Russian lady who would like to see more opportunities for collective yoga, and Jean, a house sitter who hopes to stay long-term in Nirvana Community. Anna has called a community meeting to discuss whether the project should happen. So that's what we're going to observe, is the community meeting, and the different roles will be taken up by our volunteers. And for the so us as observers, and this is exactly what we asked everybody who were not participants in the role playing in the Citizens Assembly, to really occupy this observer position. So this is what I'm going to ask each of you to try out while we're watching the role play. So first of all, your role as observers is to pay attention to the meeting dynamics, which means who gets to speak and who doesn't, and why. Who gets listened to the most or least by the others? Who seems able to build understanding and or move the discussion towards a solution? And then you're also observing what's happening out there in the dynamics. You're also observing your own tendencies, which is, who do you listen to the most or least, and why? Who do you agree or disagree with, and why? And finally, do you see any way for the group to move forward? So do you have any questions? Do you
understand what's the difference between the first set and the second set?
The first part is the meeting dynamic. So it means you're looking at what's going on between the participants. Who's talking? What are they saying? Who gets listened to? What's going on as an observer? And the other part is you're looking at your own tendencies, maybe your preferences, what you feel most drawn to, or most unattracted to. So does that make sense? The difference between watching the stage and what's going on between them, and watching what it makes inside of you, and kind of doing both at the same time. Okay? It's advanced. I've got a couple of copies of this if anyone would like to just have a look or have it with you in terms of the context and the questions. I'll just put them on the table over here. And meanwhile, what we can do is we'll make a little sort of circle here. Maybe we'll sort of make it, I don't know, here, that we can also sit around. It's like a fishbowl. So it's a bit of moving involved. So should we try to get ourselves into position that we can actually...
There's a lot of equipment.
I know, we have to be very aware here. We've got some equipment too, so we don't want to kind of knock anything. It's a bit tricky, I know, but it'll be fun.
Are they sitting in a circle?
They're going to sit in a circle facing each other.
Here, like that?
Yeah. Okay, we'll make the circle around here and then we'll sit behind them. I think that's what we're going to do here. So this is for the 6 participants. And we need to free up 6 chairs for the 6 participants, and then you'll just take other chairs and you'll get your chair back later. So, 1, 2, 3, 4. call and if you want to get some water, they'll just be a minute or so and then they'll be here. And this is the screen.
Does the community have a common kitchen or?
Does the community have a common kitchen? No. That's the.
It's okay. Still move.
So yeah, you're sitting here.
This is your chicken. So the rest of us are like a fishbowl. We're observing what's going on and we're observing what's going on inside of us. And for those of you who are in the meeting, please also speak as loud as possible that we can all hear. Yeah?
This is community meeting.
Hi, my name is Anna, and I like I said before, and I started over the garden, and started. Yes. Hi, I'm Anna, and like you read in the email, I would like to start a community garden with the help of everybody. And before I hear to the out, I want to share why I feel strongly towards having a garden and growing our own food and maybe sharing our excess with the surrounding communities. And I feel this is one of the ways we can be independent fully. And we can also do some saving, we can also preserve some water, we can also share abundance. And I really think we can probably together do this. And I don't have great expertise in growing food or preserving water and so on, but I feel that together we come, maybe we can learn and go together or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand your love about growing food next to you, and I think it's really beautiful. But let's be grounded and realistic about it. Where we live now, there is a shortage of water. Every year the water level is dropping, and we understood that a lot of foods we can't grow it here, and just wasting water and growing more tomatoes, I think it's just very irresponsible, because there's no problem if we don't have tomato at home, but it's a big problem if we don't have water. I'm coming
Yeah,
no, listen to me. It's very important.
Oh, wait. Because you said about water not being safe, we can channel our grey water to the banana patch, and we can have a dry toilet. We can put a water saving adapter in our patch. Many things can be done because we're not doing that. That's why we don't have water.
No, that's beautiful. Again, you say things that, but in the reality, what is happening, I know, like in my country, I had this experience. A young boy died because there was no drinking water at home, and it's not a story. I'm talking about reality. No one dies without tomato, but it's very important to have drinking water.
We will not grow tomatoes, we grow other things which need less water.
Yeah, water.
Many gourds, pumpkins, there are many hardy crops. Chaya, it doesn't need water. Many things. So it's not about tomatoes.
But it is about water, no?
Yeah, but
That's
we
the
can
question.
grow
That's
things
my
which need
main.
less water.
How do you do that?
And I just told you, there's so many ways. You don't have
We do it through science. I've been working with the UN for a long time, and I've been living here a long time, and we'll be doing a lot of trials and working out. We've already worked out that the COD:BOD ratio is about 4:1 with grey water, but it can be 3:1 in other places as well. So it'll be okay, and we'll study it.
And you understood really?
Like these words you use, it's beautiful again, it's research, okay, but is it real thing that he said?
No, it's really,
Anyone understood what he said?
it's all real.
Yeah. No, I mean these scientific words about water, but what is happening in the reality of the water? What is the water level in your house now? In water? Do you know that? You don't
Yes.
know. What?
Yeah.
No, I mean, all the research is beautiful, especially when it's done with UN, but it's on the net.
So we'll be investigating irrigation, seed, soil, pH, what days of the year it's best, the minimum water, drip feed, things like that.
Yeah, but you're only stating problems. We have to look at some solutions. We know the problem. Water is there. Okay, we don't need tomatoes, but let's look at a solution.
And
Maybe
the
together
solution
we
is to
can look at a
conserve more
solution.
drinking water. That's the solution.
Yeah, well, I'm one of the gardeners of the Nirvana community, and I have already put in a lot of energy and time in trying to make a garden, and it always fails. Why? Because people are living, and yeah, after a while, everybody thinks it's beautiful, it's such a good idea, but after no one actually does it.
Yeah. You start a beautiful garden and it's beautiful for 1 month, and then after 1 month, no one is working on it, everything is died out, and all the water which have been in the garden for 1 month is just gone. And that little boy is dead because of that.
I think everyone's making beautiful points, but I really see everyone's side of everyone's point of view, but I just need a house to live in. So I'm just gonna. I see a point too, but I see his point too. You know, we need water, but I think the point is valid too that we can grow crops that need less water. I think we should kind of come to a ground where everyone agrees with it, like a small vegetable patch, not such a big one. With less water.
There is type, like Uti is not far from us. It's still in Tamil Nadu, and everything is growing there. They don't have that much problem with water. They don't need to dig big bores everywhere. Like in Auroville, we have already 367 bores. Like they don't have that. They water is just running. Why we don't just get our bloody tomatoes from them? What's the point if they do it? Yeah, but I'm really angry that little boy is dead because of that.
Yeah, but there are many boys who are also benefiting from the food gardens and all over the world.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It's not beautiful, it is also fact. We talk about one boy, we talk about millions of children.
We're going to have a garden. That's the solution for rich
For
people to
collective
have a
living,
garden.
for collective living, and to go about it together. That's why we're here. That's what collective living is about.
And we can have a house, we can also have a garden, we can also save water. All this can be done together.
This project is anyways going to be a failure. It's just a waste of time.
If we don't come together, it will be a failure like other projects.
Well, you just arrived, but I've been here for longer, since the beginning of the community. And I've seen all the trials of making a garden of food, but it always failed. Why? Because people start living. How do you know you're going to stay? You might just live in one month, or you have something else to do or something. After people are going to start arguing for small details, and yeah, that's why we now employ a gardener, which I was always guessed.
I think we all need to calm down a bit.
What's that meeting? It's a meeting to just prove what you already decided. I can't say this.
Okay, now that he's gone, yeah, we can talk.
Now I can tell you all
There's
about
no
the,
need to talk, because it's going to fail.
I can tell you about the California regulation of water use for food. They consider coagulation, rapid sedimentation, filter loading sites, and disinfectation details on top of water quality. We can all do this here.
You make a beautiful point.
I'm here for human unity, not to live in a war
Yes,
zone.
the human unity also is connected with
And it's about doing things together and growing up food and other things that we also want to see. I mean, we have.
Well, if we
some
manage, of
gardens,
course, it will
we
be
want
beautiful. But we've already done it 10 times
Yeah.
trying to make it, but it never worked.
the
So how it hasn't worked for you? You've been here too long, maybe. Yeah.
Everybody was saying the same argument.
Oh.
Why would it work for you guys and not for the people before?
Because can we start a session?
You all think you're more amazing than everybody else that tried.
No,
You all think you're gonna manage and the others will just plan.
As amazing, not more, as amazing as everybody else.
And why not community project?
Well, why did they fail?
No, give us more
We
data.
failed in your time, maybe our time.
See?
It's a different
You
era.
think you're more amazing than them. This meeting is just a waste of time. I already knew it. I don't know why I came.
What like the buildings? When we all want to support community.
I also wanted to support it.
Then
But now I just,
you lost our minority. We can support you with everything.
yeah, well, it's not gonna work. So I just don't want to put any more of my time and energy. I just wasted already so much.
So what was the downfall of what we see? Because we full of yes and I too.
But everybody was also full of yes, and after a few months, well, everybody's full of no.
Don't worry, I've got 150 slides, and I can show you how to step by step. And we'll go into soil types, vegetables, organic.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe this can be a natural end to this meeting. Thank you all for.
So the chair might have been taking all the.
So, what did you observe?
Good player.
Would maybe the participants like to speak first? How was it for you?
Lots of flashing energies.
It was by chance, but it was really a bit more exaggerated.
What did you observe in yourself? What did you observe in others?
As a scientist role, I found it quite hard to do with the emotions. Like I felt quite discordant.
Now my role was that no one was trying to listen to what I wanted to listen to. I was like, I had to shunt between the aggressive and people who wanted to manifest. So it was very toxic. The balance.
Nobody was listening to you. Yeah. What else?
I think also one interesting thing was because I knew that, for example, he's playing a role, it's a bit, and it's not really him, so it's a bit easier to listen, even though I was acting like I, but it's easier to listen to someone when you know that he's playing a role and it's not really like, you don't get involved with the personal bond.
What about the observers? What did you notice?
The no dominated.
Sorry?
The no dominated.
The no domination. Yeah.
Seems a lack, at least on some people, the one with that boy and a lack of compromising. I mean, you get together not because you want to convince everybody of your personal thing, but you want to find kind of a compromise. That was lacking.
So there was a lack of willingness to compromise with some of the members. Yeah.
Also, maybe I could relate to like why was the meeting called? Like if I wanted a community garden and people, I would expect that people who would like to support it would come, and not people who don't want to support it.
So the idea was that the community needs to make a decision before a community garden is made. So it was to get that decision that we called it. Yeah.
But yeah, it was like I could relate to something.
You'd rather just go ahead and do it.
One is that, of course, it happens. But one was that I wish, like now I look back, I wish I started with saying, okay, who's in favor, who's not in favor, and maybe had that ground rule come in, and then if you had some agreements come in before we talk about the pros and cons, some basic understanding or some common.
So the meeting was missing a basic understanding of why it was called. Yeah.
Missing facility.
Missing a facility. Yeah.
We're all stuck in our own groups, so very little listening seems to happen.
Yeah, was there much listening happening in this group?
I think the lack of compromising is also because we were given roles, so it wasn't actually ourselves thinking and compromising. It was just our role.
But have you seen? Is this familiar to you? Have you seen versions of these people in Auroville?
Same lack of facilitation.
Okay. Yeah. So what could have helped this meeting, other than a facilitator and what else could have helped?
I think a lot of preparation would.
A little bit of preparation.
Yeah, so that people would have a little bit more idea. I mean, getting stuck on tomatoes and things like that could have been avoided by the scientist taking some resources that he had and suggesting certain crops or, any number of things, but preparation so they weren't there just floundering in their predetermined positions.
So some preparation. Yeah.
Some listening.
Some listening.
Yeah.
Like in principle, they couldn't agree.
When there is an opinion, that everybody goes into it deeper to see what it is exactly, the way the person is thinking, and what it is possible in his or her view, instead of shouting for the opposite.
So a way to listen and to present one's opinion.
To listen much more and to go deeper into what the person says.
Yeah, then we have been more open, like to listen to each other.
Yeah, even if you are against, but just to understand the other person.
But doesn't that go back to the original point that several people made while I was given a role? So they couldn't draw on their own natural resources unless you told them they could and they didn't. But, to try to see while we're in a deadlock, how do we move out of this? It seemed like we were given the opportunity to see the deadlock.
Yeah, exactly.
But aren't real people also into roles?
Many of you said this is a reflection of reality also. Yeah.
I feel like patience, right? What was the question that how could things move forward, right?
Whether or not there should be a
Right. No, but what she said before. Yeah. I mean, I think that more patience could be helpful.
More patience.
Yeah, that sense of we're not going to just decide on one thing and then just move to the other, but just be a little bit more patient. And I felt like this Uma character was actually changing her mind in the end. I felt like people like that could change their minds because I could understand all the road except the first guy. But I understand, but I just don't sympathize with that person. But I feel like people like that who have seen for many years things are failing, but I feel like they can sort of change their mind. And I just think that with patience it's possible.
So in the right situation and in the right condition, perhaps changing of minds could happen. Yeah. What did you notice in yourself? Which character did you relate to and which character did you not listen to? Or did not want to listen to?
I've seen how difficult it is for me to have a commitment through time, long time. Yeah, I've seen that. That was our main concern. Everything's failed because people just go and blah blah blah. So the commitment through time is something.
So you related to the character that saw things.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the freedom to move has always been the main criteria in my life. So stay in spite of commit through time. Not that easy.
So there was a balancing of the project that needed commitment and also the people who were wanting to just play and move. What else? Yeah?
The scientific mumbo jumbo needs to be simplified. I mean, often the tech part or whatever should be palatable to us so that they can actually use it.
Simplifying the scientific. Did some people have more power in the situation than others?
Yeah, they're not willing to
Yes.
listen.
Who had more power, did you say?
Tomato boy and.
Yes.
Why did they have more power?
Actually, I felt like I could sympathize with her as well. Yeah.
But why those two people have more power? Aggressive.
Because they weren't willing to change.
Not willing to change.
They're more expressing their emotions more.
It's more emotional.
More subjective, personal experience. Plus, they were not willing to listen to others, so it was only their opinions that were very, very overpowering like that conversation.
Interesting in the script I found was a dead boy because that's a very emotional aspect. And I mean, I guess it's part of the script, that's why it is there, no? But it overrides, that emotional aspect overrides the scientific and other concerns of the five other players, no? Because there's this emotion there.
Maybe it's a fake news.
But there was a moment
Just
where
made
your character said that there are millions of them. You could feel that.
Yeah, and then then there was when I said that millions of children, and then he kind of mellowed down because he didn't know what to answer that. So then that dead boy story went, and then he rooted on the fact that there can be millions of children benefiting. But the empathy was also missing from the group. Yeah. You know, because if someone had a personal experience, like how to help that person to come out and then carry on.
And maybe the setting would have helped, making it more comfortable, having some like snacks or tea.
So, also, did you get a sense of what this might have to do with the topic of water?
No,
He was the only one talking about the actual water.
Only one person was actually talking about water. Okay. Yeah. The idea was that in the water field also there are many perspectives of how one should proceed, and it's not unique to the water field, but also in many other fields. But to also maybe to get a felt sense that there are always many perspectives on a table, but what can we do with that in terms of manifesting something?
Yeah, at the end of the day, that it's a human issue, maybe more so than a technical issue. That we've got all the ideas, we know all the solutions. Why are we not getting there with them? And I think there's something in what we see here which is kind of reveals like the human element, which is often the thing that prevents us from executing all the best ideas that we know how to solve this problem. So I think this was part of what we were trying to demonstrate, was that that it's the human stuff that we actually kind of have to work on and take it really seriously as the technical. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, that's why he said they needed a facilitator.
So yeah. Jenny, you want to say something? You were there.
I distinguish between which speaks from experience and which speaks from theory or dreams. But I mean, I could hear that only two of the community members there who are speaking from experience was water the highest priority, which I would have thought would have actually dominated the discussion. that really, it very quickly became a personal issue, which is what you observe in most, what I call, type of advocacy, for everyone's entitled to an opinion, and all you do is argue your opinion, irrespective of the issue itself. And it very quickly becomes a contest, a conflict. Yeah, I think that's exactly why you do need some local citizens assembly like you. It is a typical Auroville meeting.
Okay. So thanks everyone. This is a taste of, in this actual citizen assembly, after this we went in a lot into talking about bias and how that could play into how we interact in meetings. So there's a bit of a content session around different kinds of biases and just getting a little bit of some tools to look at oneself moving forward. And there was also an exercise to set ground rules for the whole citizens assembly of how, from this, of how participants could then see what is actually needed. I think there was an idea for talking stick, a few ground rules emerged that was actually followed through the rest of the sessions when the discussions happened. So maybe we can go back to the presentation. So I believe the projector. Yeah.
The gradually selected people knew at that time that the topic was water, right?
Yeah. Go one more. Yeah. We want to come to outcomes. One more. Yeah. The next one. So we'll talk a little bit about what's now emerged from the main sort of task that the participants had to do was the Auroville water vision, which was what was requested from the water players. It was felt that the water vision was not maybe enough, and there's something more than the aspiration. So there was also then made space to have the implementation suggestions to be also done along with that. So in terms of the water vision, you'll also see it outside displayed in a few places. But essentially, participants came up with, in the spirit of Auroville, we will honor the sacredness of water by recognizing it as an eternal source of life, of healing and intelligence, and by conserving and protecting all water as our sacred inheritance. In the spirit of Auroville, we will embrace unity in diversity by using water as an opportunity to unite and collaborate within and beyond our boundaries, welcoming diverse, sustainable approaches to nurture our land and to sustain all life. Create a water-conscious society by integrating local and global wisdom and acting boldly with openness towards new possibilities. This vision has also been translated in French and in Tamil, and it's in various places everywhere. We had two other water visions before that had been created by individuals or groups that weren't really recognized in the community, so they've sort of been shelved. So this is the reason that the water players really requested a water vision that would come from the community through a process itself, and also one that could help them, because there's been, I think part of the issue has been that there hasn't been anything really to bring them together, and it came out of the outcome of a workshop that they felt they wanted some aspiration that's collective, like the dream of Auroville, that could also be something to unite the field of water. So this is the vision that came out. In terms of implementation suggestions, like we said before, there were about 57 suggestions that came out on how we could proceed. And we prioritized in terms of 6 most urgent. And part of that was to prioritize water in all levels of planning. This was the top suggestion. identifying key water zones, reviewing the master plan with water as a priority, and ensuring that new development has systems to capture rainwater, recycle water, and reduce pollution. Create a community-endorsed, independent or neutral implementation group to coordinate works and take decisions on water issues, consulting with existing groups, experts, and connecting to and supporting those interested in water. Create an Auroville water budget mandated by the community, which is accountable. Map the current situation to understand where water is being used in Auroville and where the critical opportunities are to fund and support. Bring stakeholders, experts, users, governments together to explore blockages to working together with the support of a skilled mediator. Establish systems to enable two-way sharing between the bioregion and Auroville, share Auroville knowledge, and learn from traditional wisdom and local programs. So those were sort of the six most urgent, six outcomes identified as urgent. There's a lot more, but you can look it up again on the Citizens Assembly Exploration website, or I think somewhere maybe in the Water Matters Mela it's also put up. Next. So those were the two main outcomes in terms of what the assembly itself was tasked with. But there's been other outcomes also from this first pilot Citizens Assembly. The videos are the most tangible outcome. In a way, we had 8 to 10 videos that are on YouTube that we shared with the community after the process. So it's transparent as to what content that participants actually watched to come up with the decision. We have a website that's also quite detailed around the process. You can go have a look. After the assembly, we also did presentations to the community, to working groups. And there was because it's a research project, we also did a comprehensive report. So almost every aspect of the process is actually there for you to go and look if you feel like how did people actually come up with this, you know. And of course, we're now in the Water Matters Mela, which has been a fun and celebratory outcome of the assembly. Yeah. So far, do you have any questions?
Yeah. What was Pondicherry? Oh wait, water rich. Yeah, what was that?
I think it's an organization in Pondi that's working on water. So it was the one about by region. No? So it was linking to existing organizations that are working on water. The Auroville and by region. Any other questions? You'll also have time at the end. Okay.
So just a bit more on the actual Citizens Assembly and what we studied, because this was a pilot, and really what we were trying to see whether it was proved itself as a useful set of tools for working on kind of difficult or challenging topics in Auroville. So we'd like to share with you now some of what came out of the research that we did around the topic, around the Citizens Assembly pilot. We studied actually multiple aspects. We studied participation. So we wanted to know, for example, did the random selection actually create a diverse and representative group of participants? Did it really give the feeling that the voice of the community was really sitting at the table of the Citizens Assembly? You know, even were there enough people to be kind of trustworthy? So participation, capacity building means that, you know, did it provide a set of tools and a model in which participants could actually deliberate together and learn how to constructively talk about maybe contentious topics and build their skills to do that? Education, was it effective increasing community awareness around the topic of water in this case? The process, was the process seen as valuable, and not just by the participants, but also by the broader community and the working groups? You know, we really wanted a kind of 360-degree view on this to see whether this was working for everybody, and if not, why not or where not? And of course, the outcome, were the participants satisfied with the outcome? That is the water vision for Auroville. Was the outcome perceived to be valid and implementable by the water players? and also by the working groups in the community at large, or was it some pie in the sky kind of vision that couldn't translate into anything on the ground? So this was the kind of things that we studied, and we did that with we surveyed participants in the assembly, the team members, working groups, community at large. We literally tried to get feedback from anybody who would participate. And we did that with surveys, focus group discussions, some interviews. So it was really just we wanted to understand and learn.
A big part of, one of the main issues that we see with Auroville is that many things are tried and experimented, and often just on one aspect or a few aspects they're considered failures. But part of this research is to also understand what are the learnings from a process like this, that even if some things didn't work, what did work. So it's sort of, to create an understanding that experiments can be places to learn rather than just be judged on a context of success or failure.
Yeah, and as a pilot, I think this is one of the challenges of Citizens Assembly. It's like, how do we even get this to be considered as a potential tool for legitimate decision making in Auroville? This is a big question in this town. So we felt it really important to take the time to research it and go in depth and to really try to do an honest look at and a fair look at that.
Is that research someplace
available? Yeah. No, the report's available. It's on our website.
It's on the Citizens Assembly Auroville. If you could just Google it, our website will come up, and the full report is shared. It's also on Auranet.
The report, I'm talking about specifically the report that assessed the process.
The report is comprehensive on every aspect of it, including the research.
It's a very detailed report. It's 70 odd pages. It's very well written. I think it's like of all the research reports I've seen in Auroville, I think this is really quite outstanding in terms of the rigor and the care that really went into trying to get all those different perspectives. And this is just a small snapshot. I don't want to bore you with scientific data here, but just to give you a felt sense, like a couple of the questions we explored, like participants' response to how often do you attend community meetings, prior to joining the Citizens Assembly. We want to see, did something like this bring people out who normally wouldn't sit in a community meeting? I think Johnny could speak to this, for example, and many others. And we saw that, this is rarely, never, only 18% often participated, 23% maybe less than once a year sometimes. So the vast majority were not people who would regularly go to a community meeting, but they said yes to this. I think that's interesting. And then what prevents you from participating in community meetings in general? And, you can see the options there, but the main ones are to do with
lack of time, no safe space to discuss, interact, lack of trust in the current processes, too much talking, no action, need to be with children, family, topics are not relevant to me, and then it goes down into more aspects. But those are the top reasons for why people don't participate in community meetings.
Maybe you read that question too.
And the last the thing here is that the majority expressed an interest to participate in the Citizens Assembly. You can see that almost 80% said that they would participate once we explain what the process is.
Yeah, so there was mostly people were willing to try it out, to do the experiment. Next. And then when we looked into the educational dimension, participants did learn about water bias, deep listening, how to contribute to a common focus, and felt that they acquired a new civic consciousness. So this was, we tested them and asked them before they started the assembly, how much
the knowledge about the water situation in Auroville.
What was their knowledge about the water situation? So, 2.5, I think, was sort of the average, and that increased to just over 4 out of 5 by the end. So definitely there was an increase in knowledge by the end of the assembly. And I think the quotes are lovely too. I don't know if you can read them.
Can you read it, the quotes? It's our work to become aware of our bias and watch how it may influence our thinking, communication, and decision making. I learned that one has to shut off his or her mind and truly listen. It spotlighted in a very neutral, safe way our tendencies of how we react when forced with so many different opinions, fears, concerns, lacking in communication skills when needing to come up with solutions to problems.
And another dimension that we researched was the actual process itself. So the participants, when we asked them what was the most rewarding part, many said it was the process itself, learning to understand and appreciate others' views and having the space to explore and express themselves. An overwhelming majority, 94.1%, said they will trust the citizens' assembly process for dealing with other community issues in the future. And some more quotes, learn to listen carefully first, and based on others' point of view, we should react. And it felt like we touched or pointed to a next level of community interaction. I think, yeah. Next.
We also looked at the feedback on outcomes itself from the water topic. For the participants, a majority of them said they were very happy with the outcomes of the vision and the implementation, very positive 35% and positive 47% and neutral about 17%, and nobody really said they didn't like it. We asked the water players, afterwards we presented the outcomes to them, and they were very positive about the water vision. The implementation suggestions got a lower score of 2.2 out of 5, and some of the reasons included what were the expectations that they had about a process like this. A process like this is to help around decision making and to come up with potential outcomes, but I think there was an expectation that the Citizens Assembly would in fact actually implement the outcomes themselves. It's also some of the water players understood that we would actually be doing all of the work after the actual Citizens Assembly, which was not the case. We thought the water players would be able to take some of this on. Another, I think, reason was a lot of them wanted very concrete, detailed suggestions on implementation. Whereas a process like this with non-water experts, the suggestions are broad and sort of indicated towards directions rather than detailed implementation suggestions. So these are some of the reasons that were given for breaking it low, and it's just part of the. It was a learning for us about where things were understood and what the expectations were. I think it's also a common expectation in Auroville around processes that they're expected to do everything sometimes, and I think for us it's increasingly our learning is that implementation is a very important aspect of the process like this, that you come up with the decisions, but where does it go? And I think it's not unreasonable to expect that implementations do happen after a process like this, and it's just a matter of, in a community like ours, how does that happen? And I think that also, as we move forward, that's also part of our learning in how we choose a topic, and also, how we proceed in terms of organizing ourselves. In terms of the community members, when asked how much would you like to see the vision and implementation suggestions implemented, it was a 4.5 out of 5, showing that there has been support for the outcomes and a real wish to see them implemented. Yeah. Other learnings, we work with a lot of volunteers. I think up to 100 people actually in various points stepped in to help. We had a lot of people helping in terms of communication, in terms of general support, in terms of the videos themselves for transcription, translation, dubbing. I mean, it was a huge effort. And there was a lot of willingness once people heard about the process to participate. So it's also nice to see this in the community energy for helping with a process like this. With the water players, even as they gave feedback, I think there were many who expressed that they expressed surprise at how much the vision was extensive, and also the suggestions for implementation, considering it was a lot of people in the room who were really not experts in water. For us as organizers, we learned a lot about how to create and set up a program that helps with with these kinds of places for deliberation and to really harvest collective intelligence. I know for myself, I felt there were points in that room that were really magical in terms of how all of these different sort of poles came together towards that final outcome. And to support a creative synergy in the diverse planning group. Ourselves were quite diverse in coming together. In terms of the community members who responded to the survey, when asked what was the most interesting, valuable parts of the process. Skill building was one, random participation was another, and education sort of all had about 30-35% of so we have a little bit of a clip from our making of the citizen assembly video where some of the participants spoke to the process. I think it's on the VLC at the right point, and we need sound. We also have Johnny here who participated, who's also in the video, but who can also speak to it if he likes. Okay.
I'm saying even more. By the way, this is an excerpt from a film that was made about the process. You can all watch this film too if you're interested. It's on YouTube. It's another film called The Making of the Citizens Assembly. Yes, Making of Citizens Assembly. 20 minutes. So this is just the excerpt from the voices of participants.
So I was a part of the initiative in March, and already I could see such a great structure. And the fact that the team has put so much time and energy to learn, adapt, and now we have, in fact, I think, a much better structure. But this kind of structure is really bringing conclusion and bringing out facts and figures and trying to take the personality out of the topic. So for me, it's an amazing learning experience.
It reflected also in the energy that we share when we were there. So I couldn't imagine better experience. From the organizer side, maximum goals. Really. Commitment, patience, engagement, quality, super. What I didn't know was all the layer, all the parts that is connected with Tamil Nadu, not only Auroville. So for me, it was like a big opening.
Since anybody can do, and like a jury in a court, like you feel really responsible.
But for me, I felt maybe the good site visit and that would help us to understand more.
And calm. It's not in any way tense, I've stopped going to conventional meetings in Auroville because my hackles go up the minute I sense any form of vested interest or hostility.
It created a safe space. It was very well organized, making fun at the same time, very focused. I am very positive and supporting of the continuation of this activity.
And I hope it is well received and actually do something about the water situation in Auroville. If we can do something here that's an example for the rest of India, that would be my hope. That we can start something that has a much larger impact.
Maybe. Maybe Johnny, is he here?
Yes.
Would you like to say anything about your experience and how the Mela came out of it?
As a participant, what was encouraging for me actually was the quality of the exchange between individuals. It's extraordinary how an atmosphere is constructive, then it constructs. And when it's destructive, it destroys. It's almost like a glitch, you know, that happens. And once you're within a group of people who want to build something or make something, when anybody expresses something, then the next person adds to it, and then adds to, and the thing builds. And it actually, I mean, I must admit, when it was first put to me to be part of the thing was going to take up my Saturdays for 3 months almost, and oh God, no, you know. And I would even set out on Saturday morning thinking, oh, here, you know, do I really have to do this? But I would come home so exhilarated from the quality of the atmosphere and the exchange and the communication that held it together, that I found the whole thing so incredibly encouraging that I frankly can't see that Auroville can evolve without including this as a beginning of a decision making process. But,
Thanks, Kenny, just to quickly clarify in my mind, I found the videos of interviewing all the water players so incredible as information and insight and being able to engage. But that was not actually originally part of the plan, correct?
No, that was adjusted because initially it was a COVID requirement. We couldn't have such a big meeting and have everybody in the room at the same time. So as a result of that, the video idea came on, and in fact it turned out that it probably worked even better to do the videos.
Yeah, I would like to vote that it stays as part of the mechanism of the process.
it's a good idea to take, I think, a large group. I think that originally there were 30, and then break it down into smaller groups because it takes out a little bit the theatrical aspect, you know. In large groups of people tend to perform. When you're in a small group, it's more intimate, and somehow it's a little bit more effective.
So the videos were shown, the 30 participants were split into 2 rooms and for COVID requirements, and they were shown the same exact facilitation was done in both rooms. So it was actually quite a small group that came together too. And only at the last 2 sessions did both groups come together for the final deliberation. So yeah, I mean, there's always much room for improvement. In terms of this process, there were some people that dropped out. Out of 27 participants, 6 dropped out towards the end for reasons like family, personal issues, time commitment, work. There was, like somebody said in the participants' video, they wish they had more interactions with actual people who are presenting, and also more site visits and things like that. They experience to be a bit more experiential. For us as a group, it's also it's a citizens assembly as it's done with the participants. It's also something that really liaisons with the wider community to make sure the transparency of the process is maintained and there's a constant engagement with the community. So, I mean, I think for us as a learning, we wish we had done more of communication during the process and better in terms of strategy of reaching out to we did our best, but we could have done better. And also, the process allowed for certain voices, like we try to engage it with as much diverse voices as possible, but also the limitations of the actual structure and the process meant that maybe some people could participate less than others because of language or just because it's very mental, some of the work. So it also seen for future citizens assemblies whether it can allow for structures that can include more diverse ways of expressing what we need to do. We did a lot of presentations with working groups and also the community at the end, and they're all positive in terms of its decision-making possibilities. But like I said before, there's a concern that, and it's a real concern that the outcomes may not be implemented in the community because of a lack of sustained effort. And I think this is something that Auroville anyway struggles with in terms of follow-ups and things like that. And this Water Mela has been a very important outcome to generate more energy into this work. And I can share a little bit about what's happened from the citizens assembly in terms of the actual implementation work, because I'm part of the group that's doing it. Maybe we can go to the next slide. So after the citizens assembly outcomes, we did a presentation to some of the to the water players, and try to and the citizens assembly participants to try and get energy into at least the top 6 priorities to see if there would be some movement towards to implementing it. But there is a lack of a central water body in Auroville that could have taken it up and ensured that coordination. So some of us in the citizen assembly group plus a couple of participants took on that work. There was some energy after the citizen assembly in March, but of course the second COVID lockdown happened and a lot of this energy has drifted out. So as part of what we tried to do, we saw before there was a need for a neutral implementation group that could actually coordinate a lot of this work. We tried sitting together and saying, okay, what can a group like this look like? What kind of power should it have? But it ended up being a lot of mental blah, blah, blah around how can we decide. It's clear that some of the things at Auroville aren't really working. So what we decided to do was, let's take on 2 or 3 projects that are actually based around action and are practical. And through that, we can really see as a kind of research, what does a group like this actually need to do? What kind of power does it actually need to have? So the work was just starting in terms of a 6-month action research project on the formation of the neutral implementation group. It's a bit of wordy. But the 3 projects that we identified were in the residential zone 1, a lot of the wastewater ends up in Mahalakshmi Park in some of the time. But there's very little knowledge as to what's happening with it. Is it wasted? Is it used? So we've looked into that and see whether that water could be used for construction, road service, etc. is one of the projects. Second is one of the suggestions of the need for a water budget for Auroville, looking at where the different sectors are, agriculture, infrastructure, what are the needs in terms of water projects, what are the needs for money, and to connect that with potential funding options. And to create some kind of solutions hub, a demonstration hub that's central in Auroville, where there's education around learning around rainwater, wastewater harvesting, things like that. So we identified town hall as a potential place because they already have an existing system which, if upgraded, could become a central place for that kind of education. So these are the 3 projects, and we're hoping at least one, if it sort of comes out as a complete solution, to give us a good idea of what a group like this actually needs to move forward. So we're starting with that, and actually we need help with that. We have those sign-up sheets at the back. If any of you feel called towards any of this, or even just implementation work, please put your name down, whatever small capacity you could help. And on the Citizens Assembly itself, there's been a lot of requests, at least lately, around the Crown issue for the Assembly team to take up the issue. And part of our learnings about this is what kind of topic actually works well for Auroville. And quite an important piece is the implementation piece, that at the end of deliberation, is there somebody that will actually accept a decision that's made, the outcome, and actually move forward with it. So it's actually quite a crucial piece. And at the moment, our team is working on another topic related, but on a broader level to Auroville's decision making. And hopefully in the next month or 2, we'll have clarity whether we can pick it up. But for sure, our team is still working on the Citizens Assembly, and our commitment is to at least hope it can help supplement some of Auroville's decision making processes. So that much we can guarantee. Yeah. Yeah.
When you said that water might help with the problem, what kind of resources would you need to actually help? Because you would need to have like knowledge on construction, right? And things like that.
No, actually, we're not taking it on. It was a request that the decision making around that topic, not the actual implementation, the decision making around the ground could come to the Citizens Assembly to do it within the community.
Is it on the topic of conserving water though, or just helping to make that?
I don't think it's related to what this is on the water topic, the pilot that we did. The point was around the recent issue around the crown, whether a Citizens Assembly could help with that, what's stuck there.
For the next one.
For the next Citizens Assembly, not a continuation of this. It's a different one.
And so whatever Citizens Assembly is trying to achieve, the survey and also the lot of people coming and tuning in to get a complete answer to the solution to problems, irrespective of whatever is happening. How much weightage does it have in all the groups to let it happen and facilitate?
So the question is, how much weightage does a decision from a citizen assembly actually have in the working groups? Now that's exactly part of, because this pilot is completely new, so part of what we wanted to do is do that research and also present it to the working groups to see what the feedback is. And so far, we presented to working committee, council, housing, entry. I mean, we went to a lot of different working groups and resident service, and it's been really positive so far. So it's a question of when the next topic is selected. I think for us it's quite important that there is buy-in from the working groups who maybe would be the ones implementing it. Without that buy-in, a process like this it falls into the air afterwards.
It's not like working parallel to that and implementing it for whatever decisions are being made here by the citizens.
So it's not meant to replace our existing system. It's not. Our intention was never that the GM would go or whatever existing already.
Yeah.
It's more that
working at all.
It could work, especially on a few topics, because you can see it's quite time intensive and energy intensive to create a process. It took us more than 6 months to get all of our work together. So it needs a very specific topic that's particularly challenging for the community, and so it can only do a few a year. It will not cover the assembly seat. So it can be done depending on the topic and how much time and resources it takes, but it will need for it to truly land in the community, it will need the buy-in from the working groups, depending on the topic. Yeah.
I would just like to clarify for myself because I'm feeling a big difference between what I originally anticipated in general a citizens assembly would do and what this result is. And what I'm seeing is a huge result. And I thought that citizens assemblies were really about taking a very specific issue or topic and working to do all of the necessary research and bring it to a decision by the randomly selected group. Am I confused in that all these examples that you talk about being in the world, are they taking such huge topics and coming up with such huge recommendations, or is it more specifically oriented?
Well, the EU did I think a 6 months on the global warming.
So it's all different sizes.
Yeah, and ended up with just a huge list of recommendations to different governments, you know.
Okay.
Climate has been a big topic in many countries. We're trying to shift something around climate change. Decision making as well, governance. There's been a number of pretty key issues that have been taken up on the citizens' assembly.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, just out of curiosity to understand about your process. In terms of this being a pilot, the one for water, the next one that you're looking at, whatever the topic may be, if that is started before the implementation for this one happens and it requires months and months of work, is it possible, and is this something that you guys are thinking about, that if the first one has zero implementation, which is possible, and the second topic is picked up, with this experiment not entirely complete, one may lose faith in the process, which is not necessarily the problem. But if this isn't executed at all and you go through another 18 months of people working and doing research, and it's a different pilot for a different issue, but this time it's for implementation, I think you'll have a lot of characters like her in the thing of like this didn't work. And the process is beautiful. But in terms of the way that you guys are approaching it, I was curious in terms of the implementation of the first one versus finding a topic for the second one and beginning that. Where does that sort of balance lie currently?
So I think for us, a few of us felt quite important that the implementation piece doesn't fall through, so we're trying our best to make sure. The Water Mela is already a big outcome from it, even though it wasn't necessarily part of it, but it brings into the education awareness piece. But I think there is a focus on that. But I think part of what we decided, what we felt we could improve on was the communication. And part of that is how do we frame a citizens assembly, right? Because it has so many different aspects to it that can help in the community. And decision making is one of it, but you can see like the skill building, the awareness, the education piece is actually quite a big one. So for us moving forward, I think it's also the piece around implementation is a key one for how we choose the next topic. It's definitely part of our consideration. But I think it's also, the research is showing that there's so many dimensions to a process like this that's actually incredibly rewarding and enriching for the community. So how we move forward is to frame the citizen assembly as what are the ways it benefits the communities, and the decision-making part is one part of it. So I think it's also our work to communicate and frame the citizen assembly in a particular way, and not just entirely dependent on the implementation piece, which is actually not as big a piece as one might think, depending on the topic.
Say a few words about the challenges about the implementation. And there is one thing that can be agreed that can move on, and there's no different direction to the topic, and we can start to practical work.
The biggest challenge, I mean, if you see other citizens' assemblies around the world, it's normally the government that sort of asks for it. So when a result is made, it comes back on the government. Now the challenge of Auroville is that we had this water vision and outcome, but there's no one government in Auroville to give it to and say do it. There's TDC, there's water group, there's multiple water players working on an individual capacity, and so it sat there waiting for somebody to take it up, even pieces of it, and maybe it still will be taken up. But at the moment, it just hasn't found a place to land. So there's individuals who felt inspired from the process that have created things from it. So at the moment, it's a few of us that are sort of trying to hold that work to make sure it doesn't get dropped off. But it's actually not the work we started off as wanting to do. So yeah.
The implementation part is not necessarily groups of, I don't know, people who are working, but also individuals, no? To make like small changes in their life. And like the Water Mela and this presentation and the water assembly, it's all just like kind of having faith that people will eventually like make few shifts in their lifestyles. And I think that's just like the word faith, like just to have faith in people.
Yeah, there's an element of trust involved with doing something like this that's at some level shifted something for the community. And yeah, I don't know if it answers your question or not, but we're sitting with that at the moment.
Yeah, I could.
In the main, I was wondering if all the water players, like individuals or collectives, or as an organization, and those who are working, are able to present themselves here in this Mela, or
there's a few people that are, like Toby, for example, who's talking after the next session. He was part of the experts consulted to be in the videos. I think there's a few people that are overlapping, and a few are talking in the working area about their work.
I understand that apart from sharing awareness of the topic, this work is actually very powerful. Spread the questioning so that people are more aware. And now also I'm very interested in how, like in France, the government offered this to happen and didn't take any interest in the solutions actually, right? My question is more precisely, I don't know if you have the answer, but how did it happen in Ireland with this abortion thing? How was it implemented? Because it was implemented. What were the energies in place that made it implemented? I would like to understand that, because how could it happen also in Auroville? I don't know. Is it the majority of the population that then felt concerned? But how did the politicians take it up? What makes it so important that it's taken up by the decision-making people? This is my question. I don't know.
I don't also have an easy answer to that. I've got the full report about that citizens' assembly, so if you really want to read it, you're welcome. I think that you're raising sort of bigger issues, because the reason it even went to a citizens' assembly was because it was gridlocked. The government was so stuck on this because it was so polarized to start with. It touched on religious sensibilities, and they couldn't move, and they saw this as a way out. So it opened something. I think the citizens' assembly had a certain legitimacy because it was chaired by someone. I think it was like a judge or something. There was someone who had a lot of standing and a lot of reputation was chairing it. So the whole thing had legitimacy. That meant that it was taken. The outcome was powerful, to be taken seriously. That's as much as I can say. That the mechanism through which it went through government to actually change the law, that I don't know in detail.
There was also a referendum.
There was a referendum. It went to a referendum, exactly.
Is there a woman who No, I mean, I think that it's a woman president or something. Right? I don't know.
No, this was so many years ago.
Right, so she's a woman person.
Yeah. It was chaired by a woman, I know that.
Yeah. So maybe that's why women presidents are like, I don't know, it's a woman situation, so women president, maybe that's I think so, that's what I saw. I think I saw this on Facebook.
Are you showing the films here at 5 o'clock?
Yes. Yeah, so there's 5 minutes to 5, so maybe we can end here before the next session begins. And then
Thank you for watching and participating.
5:30 we watch the movie.